All right, welcome to This Explainer. Today we're unpacking a really bizarre and honestly fascinating tale from the Mahabharata. It's a story that perfectly illustrates the dangerous collision between absolute unmoving stillness and just boundless chaotic energy. It's a classic mythic clash of opposites, right? You've got age versus youth, and a pretty stark look at the heavy price of disturbing the universe's most focused minds.
So let's just jump right in by thinking about a core question. What actually happens when an ancient, unmoving sage comes face to face with a lightning-fast princess? In a lot of mythological texts, characters embody extreme traits to teach us a lesson or highlight a philosophical point. And here, we have two people at completely opposite ends of the human experience. This isn't just a simple meeting in the woods. It is a catastrophic collision of two entirely different worlds.
We start our story with the great Saint Chyavana. He's the son of Bhrigu, and he seeks out this really beautiful, serene spot by a lake to practice his intense austerities. The text tells us that this ascetic of mighty energy took up a very specific meditative stance called the Vira posture. Now, to be clear, this wasn't just a quick morning meditation session. He became so incredibly quiet and so unfathomably still that he literally resembled an inanimate wooden post just stuck in the ground. He basically ceased to be a moving part of the world and just became a fixture of the landscape.
To put that stillness into perspective, we can actually track his physical transformation over a massive span of time. He starts out by assuming that Varana posture. Then, as months pass, nature literally begins to reclaim him. He gets completely covered in creeping vines. As the years stretch on, he actually turns into an anthill. And finally, after what we can assume is decades of just absolute unbroken stillness, he is completely enveloped by swarms of ants. To anyone just walking by, this incredibly powerful saint looked exactly like a heap of earth. He has completely vanished into the environment. But, absolute peace never really lasts in these stories, does it? Completely oblivious to the hidden sage buried under the dirt, a massive royal entourage arrives at this exact lake for a day of amusement. This is King Saryati, and let me tell you, he does not travel light. He brings with him his 4,000 wives, yes, 4,000, and his only daughter, a young woman named Sukanya. They're just there to enjoy the beautiful scenery, completely unaware that they are setting up camp right on top of a highly powerful ancient ascetic.
There is a stark, almost unbelievable contrast between these two right before their fateful encounter. On one hand, you have Chyavana. He's old, utterly quiet, essentially an inanimate post, and perceived as nothing more than a pile of dirt. On the flip side, we have Princess Sukanya. She is handsome, in the absolute prime of her youth, decked out in jewels fit for the gods, and just completely full of kinetic energy. The text explicitly tells us she's amorous, bent on frolicking and breaking twigs as she explores, literally the ultimate mythological opposites. The source actually gives us this incredible, vivid description of Sukanya. It says she was wandering like lightning, without her maids, and wearing a single piece of cloth and decked with ornaments. Try to imagine that kind of energy. She's vibrant, she's shining, moving rapidly through this quiet forest, and right here is where the tension spikes. Because the ancient ascetic who is secretly watching from inside his Anthill prison is immediately inspired with desire when he sees her. The absolute stillness has officially been disturbed by a spark of lightning. Seeing her wandering around all alone, the sage attempts to make contact. He tries to call out to her. But remember, he has been trapped in a literal anthill for decades. His voice is incredibly low, completely weakened by years of absolute silence. And the frolicking princess? Surrounded by rustling leaves and her own energetic movements, she simply doesn't hear him. This simple, tragic lack of communication sets the stage for a seriously disastrous misunderstanding. Driven by innocent curiosity, Sukanya notices something strange. She sees something brilliant shining from within this heap of earth. Now we know these are actually the eyes of the sage, staring out at her, but she doesn't. The text tells us that, completely losing her sense out of curiosity, she later confesses, "Taking it for a glowworm, I neared it and pierced it with thorns." Yeah. She literally takes thorns and pokes out the glowing eyes of the ancient sage, completely oblivious to the fact that there is a living, immensely powerful being inside that mound of dirt.
Well, the consequence is immediate and severe. As you can probably imagine, having your eyes pierced by thorns is excruciating, and the sage is just filled with immense wrath. But how exactly does an old man trapped in an anthill retaliate against a massive royal army? With a highly specific, bizarre, magical curse.
He uses his mystical power to obstruct the calls of nature of King Saryati's entire forces. Suddenly, thousands of men are greatly afflicted, completely unable to, well, relieve their bowels or bladders. It is an incredibly weird but devastatingly effective tactical strike that literally brings the whole army to its knees.
King Saryati immediately recognizes that this sudden, massive biological distress across his entire army is not coincidence. This has to be magical retaliation. He knows a powerful ascetic has been wronged. In a state of pure panic, seeing his men in agony, the king frantically asks his people, "Who is it that hath done wrong to the illustrious son of Bhrigu, old and ever engaged in austerities and of wrathful temper? Tell me quick if ye know it." He knows they're on a ticking clock before his army is destroyed from the inside out.
This part brilliantly illustrates the king's frantic, step-by-step investigation to solve the mystery. First up, he interrogates the soldiers. Nothing. They have absolutely no idea. Step 2, he turns to his inner circle. The text notes he uses both menace and conciliation, meaning he was throwing out threats and offering bribes, but they don't know anything either. Finally, seeing the army in total agony and her father so deeply aggrieved, Sukanya connects the dots. She steps up and confesses to her innocent yet completely catastrophic glowworm mistake.
The king wastes zero time. He rushes straight to the anthill, discovering the old, blinded ascetic. The lord of the earth approaches this heap of dirt with joined hands in a posture of total submission. He pleads with Chyavana, saying, "It behoveth thee to forgive what my daughter, through ignorance and greenness, hath done unto thee." He isn't making excuses here. He is begging for relatable empathy. He's asking this ancient sage to just show a little mercy to a kid who was blinded by her own youthful ignorance and inexperience. But here is the crucial turning point: the sage's steep and absolute ultimatum for his forgiveness. Chyavana is not feeling merciful. He tells the king that Sukanya disregarded him and pierced his eyes. And then he declares, "Even thy daughter would I have for my bride. I tell thee truly, on this condition alone will I forgive thee." It is a shocking demand. To save his army from literal, agonizing destruction, the king must hand over his vibrant, young daughter to be the bride of this old, blind, dirt-covered ascetic.
The text actually tells us that King Saryati, hearing these words, agreed without pausing. He just immediately bestows his daughter on the high-souled Chyavana. The sage's grace is won, the curse on the army is lifted, and the king goes home. But this marks a total, absolute transformation of Sukanya's life. The frolicking princess wandering like lightning, she's gone. She is now an ascetic's wife, tending to a blind man. Her new life is all about practicing strict penances, observing ancient ordinances, worshiping her husband, and ministering to guests and the sacred fire. Her boundless energy has been forcefully, permanently channeled into absolute duty.
Which brings us to the end of our source material, and honestly, to a very complex question. I want to leave you with this final thought to ponder. Was this a fair punishment for a quick moment of innocent, youthful curiosity? Or, when we look at the context of these ancient texts, is this really a story about the necessary, albeit harsh, balancing of extreme opposites? Can the lightning only be grounded by the earth? It's a stark reminder of the heavy, unavoidable consequences of our actions in these mythic landscapes. Thank you so much for joining me for this explainer, and keep questioning the lore.